I don't always try to throw in like really rare Greek names into the readings. I'm sorry about that, but that's the way the Onesiphorus story goes. So great job, by the way. That's a tough reading for anybody to get assigned last second. We're going to look at that text here in a little bit. Just a couple things I want to say to start. First of all, this morning, thank you so much. All your kind attention and thoughts, just very encouraging. You encouraged me quite a bit as a group. You are generous with your encouragement. And I would just say, as we said this morning, keep that up. I also see just a couple faces that it's kind of fun for me. So there's a family back here. I still need to meet all of you. But by God's mercy, your niece will be marrying my son in about a month and a half. And he spoke so highly of all of you. Jackson loves you guys. Told me you were coming. And so I'm supposed to not embarrass him tonight. And so thankful for being here. Glad you guys are here. Also, just a couple other families I saw coming in. And I really hate to do this. Nobody wants you to know they're from California. There's a couple families here I know from California. 25 years ago, I started preaching at Dublin Church of Christ in the Bay Area, California. Was there 15 years. And during that time, I got to know the Houchins, which that actually goes back way further to training, I think, with my dad to preach in Sunnyvale, California, years and years and years ago. But when I told a story this morning, and this is how you know it's not just a story, about a long run at Dana Point, California, I was staying at their house on that Thanksgiving with their children, and it was a really great time. So good to see you guys. And what the Lord does is you can't all be together all the time, but you see each other once in a while, and it just is sweet to see good, longtime friends. And then Maggie's over here with her family, and not to call you out, but you were in high school when I was preaching in California, and it's just so great to see your family as it's grown and God's blessed you and what God is doing in your life. And to all of you, I'm just encouraged by you being here. But beyond that, I'm just encouraged that you're faithful to God and God is faithful in you. And so I just pray you do even more as you continue to walk with God. Just warm me to see all of you here. If you want to circle one word on the top of your notes to start for tonight, as far as encouragement goes, what we're looking at here, you get a choice tonight, is either refresher. You can go with that one. That's kind of fun. Or just presence. And by the way, that's not with a T. That's presence as in your presence, okay? So it could be refresher or presence, but that's what we're going to look at when it comes to the idea of encouragement here tonight. And if you weren't with us here this morning, that's what we started to talk about, a series which is kind of a how-to guide, how to be encouraging as Christians. It's about growing in the discipline, the command, I think, to be encouragers as God's children. It's emphasized throughout the New Testament. Now, one of the things I did to end, I'm going to try to give assignments each time, was I asked people this morning to text out an encouragement to someone. I know. But by the way, I didn't say get your phones out tonight, so those should still be put away. Just this morning, you texted someone an encouragement, or you wrote a note. The first time I did that at home in Longmont, sure enough, I got a couple texts. And it was kind of neat to read through those. And I want to tell you, some of you are hearing that and saying, well, doesn't the preacher get enough encouragement already? My answer to that is no. And it's not just that I don't ever get encouraged, but this is what I believe about encouragement. I've never met anyone who said, I've had enough. I've had my fill. I couldn't take one more encouragement. I just would burst. I don't think that person exists. And so this is the point. We just want to give and give because it is a blessing that God fills us up with. And so I had thought about this idea of being full of encouragement. And one day in Colorado, I had a couple of boys. They were brothers. And their mom would drop them by the office and we would study. And they were young. They're about like this right here. I think, honestly, Mom needed a break, but we tried to study the Bible, and we went through notes, we did all that. Well, one day they showed up, and I had been remodeling my office. I had torn down a wall. There was a pile of sheetrock and wood and all that. I said, boys, look, today we're not going to be able to study the Bible, which they, of course, were so disappointed. I said, what I need you to do today is I need you to get that big pile of debris out to the dumpster around the backside of the building. If you could empty all that out, that'd be a great work. And, man, moms and dads would not believe this. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. Well, they're taking this load out, and I start to wonder, like 6 loads in, this might be too much for these little guys to do. And the youngest one, about the 6th trip, comes running back into my house. He's sweaty, he's dusty, he's dirty, and he looks at me and says, this is the best day of my life. And so I quickly reported his parents. I said, something's wrong. No, here's the point. I think God built us to feel good about doing good for others. There's something in there when you spend yourself on lifting others up. It's not heavy. What's the song? It's my brother. It's beautiful. It's how God made us to be. I believe that's how we're designed. And so I hope what you will do as we go through this series is keep looking for ways to be encouraging to others. It will fill you up. Visit someone in a hospital. Stop by somewhere where someone can't get out. Bless them with your presence. Just make sure that if you send them a text, you check first. This has become a real thing with text. Now look, I don't want to discourage you from encouraging, but if it's in text, you got to read twice. You can read these all over the internet, but a couple of these I really enjoyed. One of them was a mom trying to inform their kids they were about to travel. She told her daughter, your dad and I are going to divorce. She said, what? Oh, we're going to Disneyland. I meant Disneyland. And so that was a big change of thing. So one of the other ones here was, just so you know, your dad is in prison. It's like, excuse me? And so she got that all wrong too. I just love all these things. Now here's my point about that. Just a silly way to say, we can misunderstand words. You will not misunderstand genuine encouragement. Clumsy, just a little off, you're not going to miss the point. This was meant to be encouraging, and that's what I want you to do. I still believe that a clumsy effort at encouragement is better than no effort at all. So, I want to examine a form of encouragement tonight that is virtually impossible to misunderstand. Now, I just kind of go through some context here. Because your Bibles, your New Testaments are not in chronological order, there are some events as you read through there that are a little harder to track as far as the timeline goes, especially when you're reading about the life of Paul. As you go through Paul's life, it gets a little hard to understand what time he's in prison, because the fact is Paul was in prison a lot. And so I want you to think about a couple of things here. When you put it all together, Paul was in two different specific imprisonments, two different times in the city of Rome. The first time is how the book of Acts ends. And you'll remember the ending of the book of Acts. There he is. He's sitting under what is a sort of house arrest. And he's fully expecting that this isn't going to be a long time. He's going to be released. It's a unique situation. People can come and go freely. Christians from all around who are concerned for Paul are willing to meet with him. He's able to see people. It's a different situation. The second time, he's not in house arrest. He's in a dungeon. And this time, Paul's not expecting to be released. In fact, Paul fully expects that this is going to be the end. He will be executed. And instead of being surrounded by friends, he's isolated. He feels abandoned by the people that meant the most to him. And it's from this place that Paul writes and shows us what I believe is the most powerful form of encouragement. In the last letter that Paul would write, he says, you know that everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me. You could just say nobody's come to visit. But he says, all of Asia, they've not shown up, including Phygellus and Hermogenes. May the Lord show mercy on the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. On the contrary, when he was in Rome, he searched hard for me until he found me. May the Lord grant that he will find mercy from the Lord on that day. You know very well in how many ways he helped me in Ephesus. So, that's an interesting text. And I want to ask you right now, what did this man do that so refreshed Paul? You know, I don't think it's any harder than this. This man showed up. The single most important step in genuine encouragement is the gift of your genuine presence. And so I want you to think about this with me tonight. We're going to think about how to go deeper in encouragement. And the first thought from this is this: you're going to refresh people by showing up, by your genuine presence. If you want to refresh others, it demands that you be there. Be there when they need you. And I want to kind of just point out that what's going on with Paul, as we just talked about, is something that Jesus himself experienced, isn't it? In Jesus' darkest hour, the people he had done life together for years failed him. they were not there, or they were there and ran away from there. He understood exactly what Paul was going through. And now Paul, in his greatest crisis, has no one from his closest friends with him. Like, here's these names, Phygellus and Hermogenes. Paul couldn't believe. The reason they're there is not just that they didn't show up, it's that of all people, even these two who you would most think would come, Paul says, have not come to see me. And I'll just add, that's the only thing we know about those two people. Can you imagine that? You get your name put in the Bible for all time, and the only thing everyone gets to know about you is you're the kind of friend that doesn't show up when you're most needed. What discouraged Paul, by the way, was not the thought of dying for Jesus. It was the thought of dying alone. There is a real melancholy spirit to this last letter of Paul. You can hear it as Paul's wrestling with it through this letter. He says in verse 16 of chapter 4, "At my first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. May it not be held against them." You see the tension there? He's kind of wrestling with this. He's like, look, they abandoned me. They didn't show. Don't hold it against them. He's hurt, and he's trying to figure this out. Now, I want to say this, that Paul is not wrestling to remain faithful here. In the same chapter, just a little bit earlier, Paul says, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." This is not a wrestling match with his faith. It's a wrestling match with the bitterness of loneliness and not letting that consume him. What he didn't know was that during this time of need, some of his closest friends would not be there for him. And he actually says, look, may it not be held against them. He's trying here. And so Paul spends the last hours of his life thinking about, what would you think about? A couple hours at work, best day on the golf course? Paul spends those last hours thinking about the people who had been there with him all of his life. And the person he remembered the most was one he called his son in the faith. Look at chapter 1, that's how he starts this letter. "I thank God whom I serve as my ancestors did with a clear conscience, as night and day I constantly remember you in my prayers. Recalling your tears, I long to see you so that I might be filled with joy." Here he is in a dungeon. No one's shown up, and he says, all I can do, Timothy, is think about you. This warrior for Christ, who's won countless battles for the gospel, is in tears thinking about, if I had one wish granted right now, it would be to be with my close friend, Timothy. Just one more time. And he thinks of his good friends, Priscilla and Aquila. You know, had they been near Rome, they would have seen Paul. And then here it is again. "And the household of Onesiphorus." This little-known saint must have left a huge impression on Paul. So what did he do? Well, in the words of the apostle, he refreshed him. And that's why I wanted you to think about that. That's a great word. He refreshed him. I want to read this a couple times for you, just kind of make sure we got this all in our minds. Here it is, NIV. "May the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains." That's an interesting point there. Here, New King James, if you like it. "But when he arrived in Rome, he sought me out very zealously, and he found me." I'll give you one more here. We'll read the whole thing together. "May the Lord showed special kindness to Onesiphorus and all his family, because he often visited and encouraged me. He was never ashamed of me because I was in chains. When he came to Rome, he searched everywhere until he found me." All right. So what does it mean that this man refreshed Paul? Well, again, I don't think it gets any simpler than this. This guy showed up when no one else would. There was a contest years ago in England. They were trying to come up with a good definition for friendship. And the writer that actually won the competition wrote this: "A true friend is someone who walks into your life when the whole world's just walked out." And I think that guy was reading 2 Timothy, because that's how Paul's feeling here. He showed up when no one else would. Now, maybe he brought food. could have brought blankets or possibly medicine. I'll tell you one thing I'm convinced that Onesiphorus brought. He brought news about the churches. What do you think Paul wanted to know more? How are the churches doing? How are Christians? That was the strain that was on him all the time. And he might have brought clothes, and he might have brought books. But the most important thing that Onesiphorus brought was himself. Paul was refreshed by the gift of genuine presence. And I want to point out here that this man came all the way from Ephesus. He didn't cross a street to visit Paul. He crossed an ocean. This is a big deal. It's not like today where you get on a cruise ship and that's a fun thing. Like, this was a big cost and a big danger and a big risk. And when he got to Rome, it says he searched Paul out until he could deliver the most important encouragement possible, himself. Nothing's more important than that. And he did all of that in what would be the context of fear and shame. Paul was in a dungeon in Rome because Paul had been declared a traitor of Rome. Now, in the ancient world, that's a hard person to visit in prison. What do? You walk up to the guard and say, I'm here to visit my friend. Which one's your friend? The traitor. In the ancient world, that might get you locked up next to him. You're with this guy? But this man searched him out. He sought for him. He visited him. Because the opportunity to greatly encourage his brother was worth the threat of his own security and his own safety. I look at it that way, and I can understand why a lot of Christians didn't go and see Paul. This was a dangerous time, a hard situation. And it also makes sense why this man stood out so much to Paul. At great risk to himself, he journeyed to see him. Again, it says, and again. There's multiple times here. And Paul was not going to forget that. And here's what I'm saying to us tonight. That showing up is a habit that the people of God must develop. This is who we are. Because we live in a really weird age. Look, I'm not trying to be one of those old guys, kids today. But let me just be really frank with you for a minute. What makes this really hard, real connections really hard, is that we're lied to and told we're connected all the time. It's all these screens that make us think we have these close relationships or friends. And it's really changed the way we are supposed to work on the inside. You see, more often than not, the technology that's supposed to be great, we can text each other encouragements, ends up consuming our time in our lives. It takes us away from what we're really all about. You can be with somebody, but if their phone's out, are you really talking with them? Their attention's somewhere else. And look, you visit any home, restaurant, mall, you'll see what I'm saying is absolutely true. That's the way this works. And we've been deceived, thinking we have more friends, more likes than we've ever had in our lives, believing that that's community. But the reality is, and here's what studies have shown all over, is we are the most disconnected and discontented generation of all time. This stuff hasn't helped. Actually got a quote for you right here. This is from Vice Admiral Vivek Murthy. He was the 19th Surgeon General of the United States. Before he resigned, he wrote about what he thought was the greatest epidemic facing our world. And here's what he said. He said, during my tenure as Surgeon General, in my years caring for patients, the most common pathology I saw is not heart disease or diabetes, it was loneliness. The elderly man who came to our hospital every few weeks seeking relief from chronic pain was also looking for human connection. He was lonely. The middle-aged woman battling advanced HIV who had no one to call to inform she was sick, she was lonely too. I have found that loneliness was often in the background of clinical illness contributing to the disease and making it harder for patients to cope and heal. That's fascinating to me. He went on to report and talk about all the major health issues in our country today and how behind every one of them is this contributing factor, bigger problem of loneliness. He used the word epidemic about this. Now that's interesting. I don't want to just depress you. That's a reality. I read another article that I really liked. What got me into this other article was the title was, Do You Want to Know How to Live Longer? Who doesn't want to read that article? Now here's what they just said. They researched everything they could on what makes us live longer and live better. And here's what they came up with. They said, more important than quitting smoking, more important than quitting drinking, more important than exercising. That's when they had me. Find a community to be involved with every week. Did you hear that? Do you want to live longer? Look, I started this morning by saying we do life together. That's what this Christianity thing is all about. We're doing this together. I just don't think that's strong enough. And so I'm going to reword this. I'm going to leave this with the elders here. I think you guys ought to really promote this. Here's the thing. Put this on every flyer. You want to live longer? Get into a church or die. That's what this is. That's what they're saying, right? Studies prove it. You can put that out there. Now look, I give you an example of this that I think is just kind of fun. My dad, he grew up, he was a contractor and he was a preacher, so he was working all the time, and that's just the way it was. I asked him one time, I said, Dad, what are your hobbies? He didn't pause, he didn't laugh, he didn't smile, he didn't pause. He just said, work is my hobby. I thought, yeah, that's about right. My dad loved to go to this place called the Lakeside Chalet. And I laugh when I say it, because that sounds like a really nice place. It was not a nice place at all. It was near a lake. That's the only truth in it. Lakeside Chalet. 5:30 every morning, my dad for 30 years would get up and go to this place and have breakfast before he'd go off and start building houses. Every day my school bus went by there. In fact, people used to ask me, does your dad work there? No, he don't work there. No, he's just having breakfast. And every day. Years went by and we moved away from home, and my dad, every time we came home, he'd say, you want to go to the chalet? Nobody in my family understood the draw to this place. I'll tell you a few things. The food was not good. The coffee was okay. And look, if you're just at okay, why am I going? The waitress had divorced the chef, married the young waiter. They all worked together, and the chef lived in the top part of that chalet. It was like, what are we doing here, Dad? And I went back years later one day, and he said, hey, you want to go to the chalet? I said, sure. I go to the chalet. And I realized what's going on. He had a community there. Every morning, he talked with teachers, politicians in town, our little small town, builders, farmers. They had built this little community, and that had started to mean something to him. And what he was saying when he asked us to go, he's like, look, I talk about my family to this community, and I want to introduce you to them because you're who I am. And it really made me see this whole thing differently. I don't know many men, by the way, that will tell you, I really need community out loud. But I don't know a man who doesn't really need community. That's a part of who we are. That's how God built us. And so being together helps us live longer and live better. We have to do life together. Or actually, I mean to say that differently. We've got to get in a group or die. This is real to us. And so showing up is one of these ways God lets us do this. I want to tell you this. I hate promoting TV shows that you probably shouldn't watch, but I will tell you, Cheers had the best theme song of any TV show while I was growing up. Here it is, and it's so hard to read this because I want to sing it once I get started. Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everyone knows your name. Now again, as a show, it's in a bar. I can't really suggest it, but here's the point. What it really was about was community. People that were desperate to connect with other people. You see, you don't just need a personal relationship with Jesus. You need a shared relationship with Jesus. This is where it happens. There's no greater gift that we can each give each other than our genuine, attentive, caring presence. Because presence is a gift that everyone needs. And anyone can give. We can all show up. This is not about some special calling, some unique gifting that just, maybe a few unique people in the body have. Anybody can show up, and what I'm saying tonight is everybody ought to. If you think I'm stretching this, you should really pay attention to what Jesus says in Matthew 25. I want to read this to you. I want you to hear this and think about all these things together. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Look, I'm not exaggerating. When we see the King, when we show up before the King, what's on his mind is, did you show up for one another? That's what he cares about. All of us can think of a time in our lives where we don't know how we would have made it through that had God's people not showed up for us. I don't have time to tell you the whole story, but I can tell you in the darkest time in my family's history, my brother-in-law's wife was murdered in California 30 years ago. He had a 4-month-old baby, and here we were sitting through a murder trial, worried about a brother who's worried about his daughter, who no longer has a mother. And there was nothing you could say to help that. There was nothing you could do to make it go away. You could just show up. And every day of that trial, 2 rows on the front side of the defendant's side, or the other side, were Christians. They had families, and they had jobs, but they had a love for this family that was so deep. They knew, we can't make it go away, we can't say it away, we can't do it away, but we can be here for you. You don't have to go it alone. I was mentioning to someone this morning, during that time, the mailman would show up at that house every day, and bags, like, written to Santa Claus size bags, 3 or 4 of them every day, delivered to that house, letters from Christians around the world who had heard about this and just wanted to encourage. I got to tell you, I don't pray ill on anyone, but I know this about Christians. When it happens, you better be thankful you're in the family of God, because they know how to respond. They will show up for you. Am I making every effort to show up for those who desperately need the genuine presence of someone who actually cares? Let me just give you an illustration. This was on my TV. I took a picture of this. This is a picture of Penny Brown. She was an ER nurse. Years ago, she gets this rare night off. She's at work. They say, your shift is done. You can go. She's excited because her son's playing Little League. She said, great, I'm going to catch a game. As she's walking into the Little League park, she actually sees a kid is struck with a bat in the chest. He falls down. His heart has stopped. She gets on that kid right away. She performs CPR. She saves his life. And 7 years later, she's having lunch with her mom. Little diner. And she starts to choke on her food. And the young waiter comes by. Like we talked about Dr. Heimlich tomorrow. Heimlich, aren't we so excited that he came around? She got the Heimlich maneuver from this young boy. And her mom recognized him. It was the boy who 7 years earlier she had saved on that baseball field. And this is the way it works as Christians. You help me in my need, and I get to help you in yours. It's such a beautiful way that God makes all of this come together. It's sharing together in our sorrows. You should know that the ministry of refreshing is free, but it's costly. There's so many things you don't need to be a refresher. I need to make sure you understand this. I don't want any excuses about this. You don't need a degree in counseling, and you don't need a lot of time in training. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a special budget. We don't have to create some special ministry with a lot of deacons appointed to run it. You don't need all of that. You can all be a refresher. It is absolutely free, but it will cost you dearly. Because what you really need is more selflessness. This is something to refresh. You just got to always refresh on your mind. Onesiphorus is never seen saying, what's in this for me? If you expect me to go to Rome, I got a family. You heard it, the household of Onesiphorus. I got to leave them behind. I got to go to Rome. That's probably costing me quite a bit. Like, there's better be something in it for me. That thought's creeped into my head once in a while in my life. I pray God forgives me for that, because I watched as my kids grew up every single week. Christians showed up to teach their Bible class and just poured into them. You know, we had Christians we worshiped with over the years. My kids still call grandma, grandpa, aunt, and uncle that aren't related to us in any way, because people poured into them. Look, we can pray and pray and pray that our kids come to know Jesus, but the best way to do it is get in a community and let God pour into them by people who are willing to show up. Love doesn't ask, what's in it for me? Love is not self-seeking. One more thing. If this is going to work, we need to be intentionally aware. Onesiphorus could not read the bulletin and find out exactly which prison Paul was in. He couldn't look at Paul's latest email and just track where that came from. He had to go to Rome. And when he got to Rome, it says he had to search him out. That implies he might have gone to a prison, but Paul wasn't in that prison. And so he had to go to another one, and then another one, until he found Paul. But he did it because he suspected his friend needed some refreshing, and that's what he was there to do. Refreshers get this. They're just kind of spiritually discerning. They don't look at costs. They don't look at challenges. They don't look at the hardships. They just see the friend in need, and they can think of nothing else but showing up until that's able to happen. They just want to support their friend. And I want to tell you, if you want to be a refreshing church, and I hope you do, I hope you want to be a refreshing church. If you're going to do that, church, you have to retire the one big church word that seems to linger. I'm fine. We show up every week. When I say show up, by the way, just so that there's no misunderstanding, I'm not talking about the 3 hours of services each week. But that's what we do. We show up. How you doing? I'm fine. How's work? It's fine. Do you know what happens in that culture? You may have young people coming in or visitors coming in, and what they hear is, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And what they start to pick up is, well, this is a place for fine people. And if you're not fine, you better go home and get fine until you come back here, because if you're not fine, you don't belong here among us. We have to retire this mentality. Encouragers have this antenna that makes them spiritually sensitive. I've seen this my whole life. There are people that just are intuitive. You got time for coffee this week? But they may not even ask. They just show up. I sensed something was off, and I just wanted to spend some time with you. You see, if you want to be a refresher, that's what it's going to take. To know not everything's fine all the time, and that's okay, but that takes humility. And it takes humility largely because refreshers don't get a lot of attention. There's no rewards. There's no awards. There's no applause except for in heaven. Nobody here really pays a lot of attention to the one who's getting around and seeing everybody. Now, perhaps the most important part of this that I want you to be mindful of is if we're going to do it like Onesiphorus, we need to have boldness. Onesiphorus was a courageous man. To walk up to a powerful Roman soldier who was guarding Paul and planning to kill Paul and say, excuse me, I need to get through to see my friend. I have some things for him. Now, that's not easy. But I want to tell you, that's not only difficult in an ancient setting, it's not easy for any of us. I cannot tell you how many times I have stood outside a front porch ready to ring a doorbell or a hospital room, ready to walk in, and had to pray, God, please give me the courage to go into that room because there's a lot of pain on the other side of that door. And I can't say anything to take it away. There's nothing I can do to remove it, but I just know you want me to show up. And here's what happens. The person you visit is refreshed. Because by showing up, you've taken some of their pain. And I need to be very clear about this. When you leave, you take some of their pain. But that's okay. It's worth it. Because they were worth it. This is what Onesiphorus teaches us through all of this. God communicates his presence through your presence. Isn't that amazing? You ever felt that? Like closer to God because you were closer to his people? There's something behind that. Now, I get it. God is everywhere. God is omnipresent. But I also understand that the Bible claims God's presence is powerfully felt in the presence of Christian family. And so Jesus says something like this, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am with you. It's like the gathering of his children just makes his presence stronger. Paul says this, I referred to it this morning. So when you're assembled and I am with you in spirit and the power of the Lord Jesus is present, Paul says, you don't see us, but I'm there, Jesus is there. God's presence is felt through his people. He manifests his presence in a powerful way through his people showing up for each other. And so we show up to feel God's presence. And we show up to share God's presence. And that takes courage. It takes boldness. Remember this. The image of God resides in every person, just waiting to be called out. And we will not motivate others in the direction of Jesus if we don't show up when they really need us. So there's your lesson tonight. Show up, empty yourself, and ask God for courage. And here's what I want you to do. Your assignment tonight, I want you to purposefully go deeper into the relationship of each other. Look for ways to show up, to be there. I will tell you, it is scary. It can be uncomfortable, but it will be refreshing. Of all the memories Paul had to think back on, at the end of his life, he thought about the people that had filled him up. And an odd kind of math happens when one Christian really pours into another. We take victories and we multiply them. And we take hardships and we divide them. And all of that somehow works out because God's presence is shared. I want you to commit to that this week. Find a way to show up, one more way, one unique way where you can be there for your brothers and for your sisters. And here's why we can do it. It's what Jesus did. You realize that? He showed up. Of everything we needed, of our darkest times, Jesus showed up. He knew our need, and he didn't send a text, and he didn't write a book, and he didn't preach a sermon. He just in Bethlehem showed up and said, I'm here for you, and I'm here with you. And here's the real joy. He'll show up again. And we're told to encourage one another with that thought. And so I challenge you to show up for one another. I'll just give you one thing. I know sometimes you go over notes and you don't get to everything, but one of the things, and you can do this on your own, that stood out to me, Onesiphorus' name comes up a few times, but every time it's not just him. Did you notice that? It's the household of Onesiphorus. I couldn't figure that out, and I kept looking at that, and somebody suggested, and I think this is interesting, that it's possible by the time this letter was written, that man had died. And Paul says, God grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus. He often refreshed me. And they got to read about what their dad, what their husband had done that was so important in the life of Paul. And I want you to know this. The little things you do, they may seem small, they may put you out, but none of that matters. They make lasting impressions on people who need to know God. Thank you for your kind attention tonight. If you're not a Christian, I want to extend the invitation to become one. Jesus Christ died for your sins. You can have them washed away. He showed up to take that burden on himself, and he did. And you can come out of that watery grave a brand new person, born again in Christ Jesus, and God can start you on a path that is counter to the direction you were going and will fill you with all the things you never knew you needed. If you're ready to start that exciting journey of being a Christian tonight, you let us know. And if you're here and you need our prayers, the best way this church can encourage you right now is to call your name before God, who loves you and cares for you and answers your call. If we can help you in any way, you let us know. But let's stand and sing a song of encouragement together.